All right, ladies, we are more than halfway through the Disciple Maker's Handbook at Chapter 6, Intentionality. Really glad to dive into this today with you guys. So if you were not able to come to one of the groups, if you're watching this later, I cannot wait to hear your comments. Please feel free to comment below as we go through some of these questions. So let's just dive right in. One of the quotes from the end of this chapter that I really loved was, "Intentionality is not a one-time decision." And I think that we all know that that comes so much into play, especially when setting goals. If we can have great intentions, it even talks about addicts, like they can really want to change, but the changing and the making of a habit and the day after day deciding to stick with it is really what makes the difference. So the thing that really hit me the hardest in this was about, it says, Jesus did not tell us that the Holy Spirit would make disciples. And I never really thought about that before, but there really are different schools of thought of God's going to do what he's going to do anyway, and so he can just do whatever he wants. He doesn't need me. And then there's also the I must do everything all on my own, and there really is in the gospel such a balance of doing the good works that God has called us to do and has set before us, while trusting in the Holy Spirit and leaning on him for guidance and allowing him space to do the things that only he can do. So it is definitely a fine balance to continually walk, and it changes day to day of making sure that we are the ones staying on the path and not veering one direction or the other into the pitfalls on those sides of the road. So it really is intentionality, especially in discipleship. They talked about 3 different areas of that. One is our activity as somebody. Let's say, for instance, if we are the mentor, our activity in mentoring someone. The Holy Spirit is the next one. Of course, he has so much to do with the growth that can happen in that, and we have to allow the space for that. But also, a lot of the responsibility is also, thirdly, on the person who you're mentoring and their openness and willingness to respond to what it is that you are teaching and what it is the Holy Spirit is teaching, and just wisdom for their own life, because sometimes we will give counsel when it's asked for, but that may not necessarily be what's best for them after they listen to the Holy Spirit. And sometimes we also just make our own choices, so we really do have to trust the Holy Spirit, and even if they make a decision that we wouldn't have recommended, that's up to the Lord to handle with them and for us to gently guide them as well. So as I was thinking about some friendships that I've had before, of which ones had intentionality and which ones didn't. And there are many people that I was friends with in high school who now I don't speak to anymore because neither of us had the intentionality to stay in touch. But those people who I am still in touch with today, my best friend since the 2nd grade, she is still my best friend. And we had seasons where we didn't speak for almost a year, 2 years, maybe longer, and we were able to reconnect and now talk on a daily or weekly basis, basically, by texting or calling, or she sends me cute pictures of her kids and videos of the funny things that they do or say, or songs that they'll sing to themselves in the back of the car when they don't know that she's taking a video. So I love getting those from my friend, and that really adds into our relationship because she's intentional to share her life with me. And then when it comes to another type of relationship like marriage, intentionality was something that my husband and I were desiring after we realized we weren't really ever sitting down, having dinner together. And so we set aside Wednesday nights to be a time that we would have dinner together. And so sometimes church has an event on Wednesdays, and so we go to that instead, but we try to make sure that we have at least one night a week where we can sit down and have dinner together and then do a devotional as well. We had in the earlier parts of our marriage done a right before bedtime, super quick 5-minute devotional book, which was good for a season, but we've really moved into let's dive into even deeper things and just do them once a week. So I would encourage you guys, I know that we all on the call were like, we don't really have many intentional things that we've set aside in certain relationships to make sure that with your marriage, with your kids, with your family, setting aside a specific time or place or whatever to be somewhere where you guys are growing together in your relationship and also spiritually. So I would encourage you to think about what could that mean for you to have a set aside time or place or thing that you get to do, even if it's only occasionally, to really be pouring into those relationships. So of course, as it comes to discipleship relationships, something that we need to be mindful of, not as much for if it's just a pair of two, but discipling groups gravitate to the lowest common denominator. And I think that's basically just weakest link, the same sort of saying of the larger the group, the more that if somebody is always running behind, never prepared, never has read, that's really going to pull the group down. In these smaller groups, it's going to be a little bit more tight knit, and that will be nipped in the bud or taken care of or parted ways much sooner before it can have that sort of effect. But just be aware to not be that weakest link, and to sometimes things are going to happen, and that's not really what we're talking about when something out of the blue comes up, but when it's the patterns of realizing that that person might not be the best fit for this type of intentional relationship. So something to be asking yourself, something I need to be asking myself, is for these relationships that we want to be entering into, of whether you are looking to be a mentor or be mentored or both, what special skills or knowledge you need to succeed in those relationships. And it was interesting thinking about using tools. It talked about that as being one of the things that we can use to our advantage. And like I said about sometimes we can fall into the side of, oh, the Holy Spirit's going to do everything. We don't necessarily need a plan. But a plan is, Jesus had a plan. You know, he came into everything with a plan, but he also was very flexible by the leading of the Holy Spirit and just what fit best for the person in the moment. And of course, situations just happen and you have to respond to them. But what tools can we be using and what plan can we be making that's very simple to follow so that we can have some sort of structure to the relationship? Organic relationships are great, but in order to really help them grow deep, you have to water it and feed it for sure. So the steps that they recommended, they weren't an exactly a plan, but for you to know is have a plan was one of the things. Use the tools that we have of course, the tool that is most important is the Bible. And so I will be sharing more and more tools as we get further into this and talking about kind of what those tools can be. But being a role model yourself is number 3 of being intentional. Being discerning, like I said, with understanding where somebody else is in their walk. And he says, this may surprise some of you, but we believe that you should not disciple everyone who wants to be discipled by you. Because though there is that desire, there may not be the intentionality and the commitment to showing up and being faithful in that relationship. And then, of course, I love that they really always end every chapter, it feels like, with multiplication is the purpose of discipleship. It's not just for our own personal benefit and self-growth. It is so that we can grow and then we can help others grow. So passing it along is always the point. And so I really look forward to hearing what you guys think about intentionality, starting with the relationships that you already have, and then also the questions or ideas or tools or resources that you guys need or have to share about starting a discipleship relationship. So I hope that you found these videos to be helpful, to have somebody to commune with about all of this that you are reading on your own, or whether you're just rewatching this after having already been there, but just to kind of mull over some of these thoughts that were brought up. This book has been very good in challenging me personally as well. So I will see you guys next week for chapter 7.